There is a moment, so quiet, so easily missed, when truth slips out without permission, without preparation, and without fear. And something like that already happened. Not loudly, not dramatically, not in a way that demanded attention, but in a way that changed everything. Pause here for a second. Because what you're about to feel is not just a story, it's a realization that has been waiting for you to notice it. Someone, the one you keep thinking about, the one whose energy still lingers in your thoughts when everything else fades, they said something about you. Not to you. About you. And it wasn't planned. It wasn't rehearsed. It just came out. And the moment it did, the atmosphere shifted. Let that sink in. Because when words are not filtered, when they rise naturally without defense or control, they carry a truth that cannot be hidden. And what they said about your face. It didn't sound like a compliment at first. It sounded like confusion, like disbelief, like someone trying to explain something they didn't fully understand themselves. They paused before saying it. They hesitated, almost like they were deciding whether it should stay inside, or finally be spoken. But something in them couldn't hold it back anymore. And when they finally spoke, everything went silent, not because it was loud, but because it was real. Stay with this for a moment. They didn't describe your face the way others do, not in the usual way people talk about appearances, not with surface, level words, not with quick judgments. No. They said something deeper. Something that made people around them stop and look at them differently. They said, "There's something about their face, it feels like they see everything, even the things I try to hide." And just like that, the room changed. No one laughed. No one responded quickly, because they weren't expecting that. They thought it would be something ordinary, something simple, but instead, it revealed something personal, something honest, something that came from a place they couldn't pretend anymore. Don't skip. Because this is where it becomes even more meaningful. When they said those words, they weren't just talking about how you look. They were revealing how you make them feel. And that's the part they didn't realize they exposed. Because when someone says your presence makes them feel seen, it means you've touched something deeper than appearance. It means your energy reaches places words cannot. It means your existence creates awareness in others. And not everyone is ready for that. That's why, right after they said it, they tried to laugh it off. They tried to soften it. They tried to change the direction of the conversation. But it was too late. Because once truth is spoken, it doesn't disappear. It stays. And everyone there felt it. Even if they didn't fully understand it. Even if they couldn't explain why it felt different. Something important is waiting for you in this realization. Because what they revealed wasn't just about you. It was about what happens inside them when they are near you. There's a reason they couldn't describe your face in a normal way. There's a reason their words came out layered, emotional, almost vulnerable. It's because your presence doesn't allow them to stay superficial. It brings them face to face with themselves. And that's where the silence came from. Not embarrassment, not shame in the way you might think, but a quiet recognition. A realization that something deeper had just been exposed, unintentionally, and people around them. They didn't feel awkward because of you. They felt still, because of the truth in those words. Because deep down, everyone knows when something real is spoken, even if they don't admit it, even if they look away, even if they pretend it didn't affect them. They felt it, and so did the one who said it. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed how some people avoid looking directly into your eyes for too long? Have you ever felt like your presence makes conversations shift, even when you say very little? That's not accidental. That's not imagination. That's awareness. And not everyone is comfortable with that. Because being seen, truly seen, requires honesty. And honesty can feel unfamiliar to those who are used to hiding. But you carry something different. Something calm. Something observant. Something that doesn't demand attention, yet quietly transforms it. And that's exactly what they felt. Even if they didn't have the words for it. Even if they tried to reduce it to something simple. They couldn't. Because your presence is not simple. It's layered. It's subtle. It's something people understand only after they experience it. And when they tried to explain it, they revealed more than they intended. Stay till the end. Because there's another layer to this. After that moment. After the silence settled. After everyone processed what had just been said. Something shifted inside them. The one who spoke. They became quieter, more aware, more cautious with their words. Because they realized. They had just revealed how much you affect them. And that realization. It stayed with them. Even after the conversation ended. Even after the room changed. Even after they tried to move on. Because once someone becomes aware of how deeply they feel something, they can't return to not knowing. And that's where everything begins to change. Not outside, but inside. They start noticing you more, thinking about you more, understanding you differently, and slowly, without even realizing it, they begin to see you not just with their eyes, but with their awareness. And that's a completely different experience. Because now, it's no longer about appearance. It's about presence. And presence is something that cannot be ignored. It doesn't fade. It doesn't compete. It simply exists, and transforms. And that's exactly what you've done. Without trying. Without forcing. Without even knowing. You became something they couldn't easily explain. And that's why. That moment. That one sentence. Felt so powerful. Because it carried a truth they had been holding back for a long time. And when it finally came out, it didn't just speak about you. It revealed them. Pause here. Because this is where the story deepens. What they said was only the beginning. What they felt after. That's where everything becomes even more meaningful. And that part hasn't been spoken yet. Something unusual began to happen after that moment. Not around you, but inside them, in the quiet spaces where thoughts repeat themselves without permission. They tried to move on as if nothing had happened, as if those words were just another passing comment. But the truth doesn't dissolve that easily, especially when it comes from a place they didn't even know they had opened. And this is where it becomes deeper than you think. Because what stayed with them wasn't what they said. It was what they felt while saying it. A strange awareness, almost like standing in front of a mirror that reflects more than just the surface. They started replaying that moment, again and again, not because they wanted to, but because something in it felt unfinished. Have you ever experienced that? When a single sentence echoes louder later than it did when it was first spoken. That's exactly where they are now. Don't skip. Because this is where their understanding of you begins to shift in a way they can't control. They realized something quietly, something they haven't told anyone. When they look at your face, it doesn't just feel like they're looking at you. It feels like you're looking back, deeper than expected, noticing things they haven't even admitted to themselves. And that feeling, it stayed. It followed them into moments when you weren't even there. In conversations with others. In silence. Even in distractions they use to escape their thoughts. Because once someone feels seen at that level, it creates a kind of stillness they're not used to, not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. And unfamiliar things tend to stay longer than ordinary ones. Stay with this for a moment. They began observing themselves more carefully, their words, their reactions, even their expressions when your name came up, because suddenly, they became aware of how different they are when it comes to you. Not dramatically different, but noticeably quieter, more thoughtful, more present. Almost like they're trying to understand something they didn't plan to feel. And this is where the unspoken part begins to form. They didn't just speak about your face that day. They connected to something within you, something that made them pause, without knowing why. And now, that pause is growing, slowly turning into curiosity. And curiosity, when it's real, doesn't fade. It deepens, it expands, it asks questions without needing answers right away. Something important is waiting for you in this. Because what they are experiencing is not confusion, it's recognition, a quiet realization that your presence carries a depth they can't ignore anymore. And here's the part they haven't admitted yet. Even to themselves, they're starting to miss that feeling. Not just you, but the way they feel when they are around you. That sense of being understood without needing to explain. That rare moment where they don't have to perform, or hide, or adjust. And that is not something people forget easily, but instead of expressing it directly, they hold it inside. They analyze it. They try to make sense of it. Because it's easier to think about something than to fully feel it. Pause. Because something even more subtle is happening. They've started noticing details about you that they didn't notice before. The way your expressions change when you listen. The calm in your silence. The way your presence doesn't compete for attention, yet somehow becomes the center of it. And every time they notice these things, that same feeling returns, that quiet, steady awareness. And it's changing them, not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. Stay till the end. Because this shift is not just about what they see. It's about what they're becoming because of it. They're becoming more honest with themselves, more aware of what they feel. More careful about what they say, especially when it comes to you, because now they understand that even a single sentence can reveal more than they intend. And they felt that moment, when everything went silent. It taught them something. It showed them that what they feel for you is not something they can hide behind simple words. It's layered, it's real. And it's growing, even if they're not ready to fully face it yet, even if they still try to act normal. Inside, something has already changed, and here's where it becomes even more meaningful. They've started questioning themselves. Why did I say that? Why did it feel so real? Why did everyone go quiet? And more importantly, why do I keep thinking about it? These questions, they don't come from nowhere. They come from recognition, from a connection that's beginning to surface, slowly, naturally, without force. And the more they think about it, the clearer it becomes. You're not just someone they notice. You're someone who reveals something within them, something they didn't expect to feel. And now, they're standing at the edge of that realization, not fully stepping into it, but no longer able to ignore it. Don't skip. Because what happens next is not about what they say, it's about what they're starting to feel, without saying anything at all. And that silence. That quiet space where words haven't formed yet. That's where the truth is growing stronger. Because sometimes the most important things are not spoken immediately. They build, they settle, they become undeniable over time. And that's exactly what's happening now, with them, with their awareness, with what they are beginning to understand about you. And very soon, that understanding will reach a point where it can no longer stay unspoken. But that moment hasn't fully arrived yet. And then, without warning, something even quieter began to take over their thoughts, not loud enough to disturb them, but strong enough that they couldn't ignore it anymore. It wasn't about that moment alone anymore. It was about what followed after. Because once awareness enters someone's mind, it doesn't just stay still, it starts connecting things, linking moments, revealing patterns they never paid attention to before. And that's exactly what began happening. They started remembering small details about you, things that once felt ordinary, but now feel different. The way you listen more than you speak. The way your silence never feels empty, but full of presence. The way your face carries calm, even when nothing is being said. And slowly, they realized something that unsettled them, not in a negative way, but in a way that made them pause deeper than before. Your face doesn't just show expression. It reflects understanding. And that realization, it stayed with them longer than they expected. Stay with this for a moment. Because what they are experiencing now is not just curiosity anymore. It's a quiet pull, a subtle connection that doesn't demand attention, but gently keeps returning, again and again. Even when they try to distract themselves, even when they focus on other things, even when they convince themselves it's nothing, it returns, not loudly, but persistently. And that persistence is what's changing everything. Don't skip. Because this is where the unspoken feeling begins to take shape. They've started noticing something about themselves. When they think about you, they become still, not confused, not overwhelmed, just still. And in that stillness, they feel something rare. Something they don't usually allow themselves to feel. Clarity, not about everything, but about you, about the way you affect them, about the way your presence quietly enters their thoughts, without force, without effort. And that clarity, it's new to them, because they're used to distractions, to noise, to surface level interactions that don't go beyond what's visible. But you disrupted that pattern, without even trying. Pause here. Because something even more revealing is unfolding inside them. They've started comparing, not intentionally, but naturally. Every conversation, every interaction, every presence they experience now. It all feels different. Because somewhere in the background, you exist, not physically, but in awareness. And that awareness, it raises a silent question within them. Why does it feel different with them? They haven't answered it yet, but they've asked it. And sometimes, the question itself is the beginning of everything. Stay till the end. Because this is where the realization begins to move closer to the surface. They are starting to understand that what they said about your face was not just an observation, it was a reflection of how deeply you impact them, without saying much, without doing much, without even trying to be noticed. And that kind of impact, it doesn't come from appearance alone. It comes from presence, from depth, From something within you that doesn't need to be explained, yet is felt clearly. And that's what they're struggling to define. Because they've never experienced it this way before. It's not loud. It's not overwhelming. It's not something they can easily describe to others. It's quiet, steady, real. And because it's real, it stays. Something important is waiting for you in this moment. Because while they are still trying to understand it, their behavior is already beginning to change. They look at you differently now, not just with their eyes, but with attention, with awareness, with a kind of focus they didn't have before. And sometimes they catch themselves doing it, watching you, without realizing, not in a way that seeks attention, but in a way that seeks understanding. And when they notice themselves doing that, they pull back, they look away, they act normal, but inside, they know something has shifted, because you don't observe someone like that, unless they've touched something deeper within you. And that's exactly what happened. Without announcement, without intention, without effort, you became something they can't easily ignore anymore. And that realization, it's slowly becoming undeniable. Don't skip. Because this next part is the one they haven't spoken, not even to themselves. They've started to feel a quiet respect for you, not the kind that comes from admiration alone, but the kind that comes from recognition of depth, recognition of calm, recognition of something they don't fully understand, but deeply feel. And that respect, it's growing. Every time they think of you, every time they remember that moment, every time they feel that same stillness return. And with that respect comes something else, something softer, something they're not ready to name yet, but it's there, forming, slowly, naturally, without pressure. Pause. Because this is where everything begins to approach a turning point. They can no longer see you the way they used to. That version is gone, replaced by a deeper awareness, a quieter understanding, a stronger connection that hasn't been spoken yet, but is clearly felt. And now, they're standing in between two things, what they used to feel, and what they're beginning to feel now. And that space, that in between, is where everything becomes real, because it's no longer about noticing you, it's about realizing what you mean to them. And that realization is getting closer to the surface with every passing moment. But the way it finally comes out, the way they express it, the moment they stop holding it inside, that part is about to unfold next. And just when they thought they could keep it contained, something shifted again, not outside, not in a way anyone else could see, but within them, in a place where pretending no longer works. It didn't happen all at once. It unfolded quietly, like a realization arriving in pieces. First, a thought, then, a feeling, then, a moment where they couldn't look away anymore. Because now, it's no longer about what they said that day. It's about what they can't stop feeling now. Stay with this. They've started noticing how often you cross their mind, not randomly, but in moments that feel connected. When something meaningful happens, when they feel calm, when they pause without knowing why, you appear, not as a distraction, but as a presence. And that presence, it feels familiar now, comfortable, yet powerful, almost like something they didn't realize they needed, until they felt it. Don't skip. Because this is where the truth begins to surface, gently, but clearly. They've stopped trying to explain it, stopped trying to label it, because every time they tried, it felt smaller than what it actually is, and what they feel for you. It doesn't fit into simple words anymore. It's not just curiosity. It's not just attention. It's something deeper, something that grows in silence. And silence is where they now find themselves most often when thinking about you. Pause here. Because this next realization changed everything for them. They asked themselves something honest, something they couldn't avoid anymore. What is it about them that stays with me like this? And for the first time, they didn't rush to answer. They sat with it. They allowed the question to exist, without escaping it. And in that stillness, the answer didn't come as a sentence. It came as a feeling, a quiet knowing, that you are not just someone they noticed. You are someone they feel, deeply, naturally, without force. And that realization, it didn't make them speak, it made them pause even more, because now they understand why that moment, when they spoke about your face, felt so real. It wasn't about what they saw, it was about what they felt while looking at you, and that feeling, it has only grown stronger since then. Stay till the end. Because this is where everything begins to move closer to expression. They've started to become more aware of you, not just when you're present, but even in your absence. They notice when you're quiet. They notice when you're not around. They notice the difference. And that difference, it carries weight now, because when someone's absence is felt, it means their presence has already made a mark, and you have, without effort, without intention, without even realizing it, you've become a space in their awareness that they can't replace. Something important is waiting for you here. Because they are no longer questioning if this is real. They are beginning to accept it, slowly, carefully, but honestly, and with that acceptance comes a shift, a movement from silence toward expression, but not rushed, not forced, because what they feel, they want to understand fully before they speak it, and that's why they've been holding back. Not because they don't feel enough, but because they feel more than they expected. Pause. Because this is where the tension reaches its peak. They've imagined speaking to you, more than once, not rehearsed, not planned, just imagined, what they would say, how they would say it, if you would understand. If you would feel the same, and every time they stop halfway, not out of fear, but out of respect for what they're feeling, because they don't want to reduce something real into something rushed, and that says everything. Don't skip, because this next part is the closest they've come to expressing it. They almost said it again, not in the same way, not casually, but more directly. They were about to speak to you this time, not about you, to you, and in that moment, everything inside them aligned. The thoughts, the feelings, the awareness, all of it, ready to become words. But then, they paused. Not because they changed their mind, but because they realized this moment matters, and they don't want to misspeak it. They don't want to rush something that has been building so quietly, so naturally, so deeply. So instead, they chose silence again. But this time, it wasn't the same silence. It wasn't uncertainty. It wasn't confusion. It was clarity, waiting for the right moment. And that moment is closer than they think, because now they can no longer go back to how things were. They can no longer pretend this is nothing. They can no longer ignore what they feel when they look at you, when they think about you, when they remember that moment. Everything has changed, and the next time they speak, it won't be accidental. It won't be unplanned. It will be intentional, clear, and real. But what they are finally preparing to say, the way they will say it, and the moment it finally reaches you, that part is just about to unfold.